Hey vinyl community, it's Jim, Vinyl Designs. I wanted to make a video that is strictly about thanking the vinyl community. And that's pretty much the focus of this video. So, a little background if you don't already know. A couple years ago, our home was destroyed in the wildfires that came through Sonoma County, along with a lot of other people. And we were one of the fortunate ones where, we got out and got our animal out and we were safe. And we've been fortunate that we've had a good place to live and that we had insurance that covered our home. So we have a lot of very positive things to be thankful for. The experience itself was, as horrible as you'd expect. But we really wanted to focus on how we could turn it into something positive, which is, it's an undertaking to do that, but it's also, in some ways, when you have a major event or a major tragedy in your life, it can be an opportunity. And for us, the opportunity was that it gave us a second to kind of pause and think about what really mattered to us. And what mattered to us most was really engaging with our own lives in a way that we hadn't in a while. And that came out in creative ways. I have a background in art. I'm a graphic designer and art director, and I have a background in painting. I decided that instead of using our insurance money that we had gotten for the contents of the house to replace, instead of using that money to just simply go out and purchase furniture for the house, for instance, that I would spend the next couple years that it would take to build the house building furniture. And so that's what I've been doing. And my wife has been spending time making soft goods. She's always been a seamstress and she's always loved sewing, but she's kind of really taken on a lot in her approach to this as well, making some really beautiful things. So that was kind of the beginning of the process, and for me what that meant was I knew nothing about woodworking. And so it turned me into this person who had to go and figure out how to do everything from scratch, basically. I needed to know, what tools do I need? What's the approach that I need to take to make these things? How do you make these things? What are the designs that I really love? And so it became kind of a big obsession of mine, and a lot of time spent on it. And that meant a lot of time spent on YouTube, because YouTube is this amazing place where you can learn just about anything. You can engage with just about any subject and just about any skill. It's phenomenal for that. So I was spending a lot of time watching videos about woodworking and how to do things. And at the same time, because I've always been a really music-obsessed person through my whole life, and had a large collection of music that we lost in the fire, I started coming across these videos for something that I couldn't figure out what VC meant at first. It took me a little while. And then I realized that there was this whole thing called the vinyl community, where people were talking about records and people were talking about music, and it was just an amazing thing to come across. All my life I had thought that I was a pretty savvy person when it came to music. And as soon as I got into the VC, I realized I knew nothing about music, and I knew nothing about what artists existed, were out there. I knew nothing about the catalogs of artists. I knew nothing about records themselves, and it was this whole world that opened up to me, and it was really amazing. And it's been a great thing for me to be able to have something where I can focus my time and energy on a creative outlet like woodworking and furniture building, and then on an artistic outlet where I can take in things like music. And so that's just been wonderful for me to concentrate on. Just before the fire, 6 months, maybe a year before the fire, I had started to bring my records back out. They'd been tucked away in the garage for years. And I'd started to bring them back out, and I had my turntable set up and was listening to things, and there was this sort of inkling of, this seems like a better way to engage with music. And it's because it's very intentional, it's very focused. You have, a limited amount of time before you have to flip the record, so you can't really just kind of walk away from it. And it also seemed a place where I could, when buying new music, that there was actually a real amount of money going to an artist, rather than the streaming world, which, I know they get paid, but they get paid very little from streaming. And it's a world where it's like commensurate with the number of plays, but the number of plays doesn't equal the value of an artistic medium in your life. So I could listen to a song once, and that's worth $20 to me one time. I could listen to it 1,000 times, like a lot of the music that I've heard on the radio in my life, and it means nothing to me. So the number of times that something gets played doesn't equal how much something is worth to you. But that was all just sort of coming up in me before the fire. And once the fire happened, I decided, okay, well, in rebuilding, I'm going to focus on vinyl. So that also meant that I would be replacing music that I had, records, CDs, etc. And I quickly realized that I didn't really want to replace CDs. I never connected to them, even though I bought literally thousands of them. But I never really connected to them as an object. And it seemed if I was going to start over from scratch, the thing that I wanted to do was connect to the objects that meant something to me, that I connected to, that were a tactile and visual medium that I really enjoyed. I also loved the history of play in a record, that it degrades over time. I love that. It forces you to be precious about it, and it also forces you to recognize the history of an object, which is phenomenal. So all that brings me around to all of the people that have contributed to my life in the last year on the vinyl community. And the first thing I want to do is just a general thank you to all of you. It's really meant a lot. It's been a big deal for me. The second thing is I wanted to kind of go through a few records and just talk specifically about a few acts that I just have really enjoyed that I didn't know about before the vinyl community. When I first started watching videos, I kind of thought I was just going to be seeing a lot of old, Beatles and Stones records. And there's a lot of that out there. But I also realized that there was just a ton of music, both old and new, that I just didn't know about. And so thank you for bringing that to my attention. And some of these, I don't know exactly who it was that first introduced me to these acts, because when I first started hearing about some of this, none of the people presenting were names to me. They were just videos that I was watching. And I hadn't watched enough of them to recognize the personalities and the channels, etc. So I don't always know who I heard about something from, but I'll try and mention as I can. This first one is actually a stack of records from the same artist because when I first heard about them, I started listening to them and just loved them. And that's the Buddhist Band. And I now have, all 5 records from the Buddhist Band. This is the first record. Number 2, Buddhist Band 2. Number 3, Buddhist Band 3. These are all the regular black vinyl editions, no colored editions or anything like that. The 4th record, which is Burnt Offering, which is also a gatefold, as it should be, because you couldn't do a record like this without it being a pure 70s homage with a gatefold. It would just be wrong. And then Buddhist Band 5, which is actually, this is the record that I heard people talking about because it was the most recent that had come out, and people were talking it up at the time. Phenomenal band, like just the greatest 70s, sleazeball movie score that you could ever imagine, and just perfect, just great music. Had the chance to see them a few weeks back at Lagunitas, which is a brewery in Petaluma, just next door to us, and they were amazing, really amazing live. And so thanks. It might have been Tales from the Crate, which is who I'm going to talk about now on this one, that I first heard about the Buddhist Band from. There's a few things from Tales from the Crate. And Andrew, thank you. Next one was definitely Tales from the Crate, and that is Annette Peacock and Extremes. I had never heard of Annette Peacock, totally new to me. And when I heard a needle drop that I think Andrew had done, I just thought it sounded like the kind of spiritual mother of PJ Harvey and a lot of the 90s women that were creating this very strong, very kind of creative music. And I was shocked that I had never heard of this person. So I went and grabbed this record and then loved this record. And then I started reading about her and realized that she was really known for jazz, and this didn't really feel like a true jazz record, and it really isn't. It's more of a kind of rock, pop kind of record. It's got some jazz elements to it, but so I started looking into her other records, and this is The Perfect Release, which is definitely a bit more experimental, a bit more jazz. This is Sky Skating from 1982, I think, from the early 80s. And by this point, she, I think, had lost her major label support and was self-producing these on her own label. I think this is a beautiful record. A lot of people hate this record that like her. I saw a lot of comments when I was, looking up her records. I think it's a beautiful record. It's very pretty record, but really just great. This is, what is this called? Read these. I Belong to a World That's Destroying Itself, also known as Revenge. So this is technically, I believe, her first record that was released in 1971. Or it's a version of that. And this is a repress from just a few years ago. This is definitely more avant-garde, more experimental jazz, and isn't as easy listening as some of the other records, but is really intriguing and interesting, and I really did enjoy it. So that's Annette Peacock. Thank you. The next one is also from Tales from the Crate, and that is among others, I should say, because I did come across these records on other channels. So it may be that some of these, Andrew was showing first, last. I don't know that it matters in the VC really, because it's where I found it. Lee Moses, Time and Place, a real classic, lost soul record, somebody I had never heard of, and which isn't terribly surprising because the vinyl, I guess, sells for like, I don't know, $1,000 or something crazy, the original at least. But this is an amazing record. It's definitely in the sort of classic late 60s, early 70s soul tradition, and just a beautiful, truly lost classic. I was also, because I had heard of him by this time when this came out, which is How Much Longer Must I Wait? This is a collection of singles from 65 to 72. I was fortunate enough to grab this, and it's on a very cool colored vinyl pressing. It looks kind of like a beat to me. Also really good. Not quite, the quality of Time and Place, because it's not that consistent. It's over a 7-year period. But good stuff, well worth grabbing that record. Next is a record that is someone that I knew and actually had quite a few records from, and that's Throbbing Gristle. Loved Throbbing Gristle. I was a big industrial fan from, I guess early 80s on. The reason why I wanted to show this is because there's a channel from called ThisMachineKillsMusic, and she is just amazing in her depth of knowledge of industrial, avant-garde, electronica, ambient, just synthwave, darkwave. There's just a whole realm of music that I've always been attached to and had a lot of records from, but I haven't had the opportunity to replace a lot of them yet. And so I just grabbed something that I could show that that I would be able to talk about her channel. I have a long list of things that I want to pick up that I had not heard before, so a lot of things that she introduced me to. But there's so many things. When you're starting over from scratch, there are just so many things that you have to, or not have to, but that you want to replace. So please check her channel out. She's amazing. She knows so much about that entire field. She's really articulate. She has a great sense of aesthetics. She's definitely a channel worth checking out. And I haven't heard anyone else mention her. Definitely a little bit more experimental and out there as far as music goes. Not the kind of music that I see very often on anybody else's channel. Every once in a while I'll see somebody mention a little bit of industrial stuff here and there, but I don't seem to come across many channels that are like hers. And if there are more, I'd love to hear about them. And next was just a fun record that I stumbled across a few weeks ago because Arif Weinbender had spoken about it, and it's called, let me see what this is called, the Mystic Moods Orchestra, record called Highway 1. That's this record. And this is, let me take it out. This is a real gem from the 70s. The reason why I wanted to pick it up is because he had been talking about it and referring to it as an incredibly strange, disturbing record that was just, it just seemed to have him up in arms about like how weird and creepy the record was. So immediately I had to find it, and he's right in a way, because it's a funny record. It's very sort of, it's intended, I think, to be like this kind of romantic background thing. It's like a early 70s symphonic, you know, strings, and then it's layered with ocean sounds and like wind in the trees, and then there's this narration over the top of it that's that is this guy telling a story or talking about, you know, his lost love, and it's really creepy. It just doesn't come across the way I think they intended it to, and it's awesome because of that. It is. It's definitely something that it's so bad that I really I think I need to have a lot more from the Mystic Moods Orchestra. So thank you, Arif Weinbender. Next is a record that James Griffiths showed, and I came across, and it was really inexpensive, and I loved the packaging. I loved the cut off, and they cut off the sleeve in order to make that work. But you can also put it back together this way, which is not how it's actually intended to go. But I think it's actually cool this way as well. I think if you store it this way, you'll destroy the sleeve, but it's a cool record. And this is the Motors. This is their third record, I believe, which was called Tenement Steps. I didn't end up loving the record. They're kind of a 70s sort of power pop band. They only made a few records. But I wanted to show this because James Griffiths is amazing in the way that he talks about music and the kind of respect he shows for both music and for just subjects in general, where he'll approach something from usually a different perspective than other people will. He'll kind of always take a different tack on something, and that I find really interesting. And he's just really passionate in his love of music, and that's just really amazing to see. Those are the only records that I have to show that are like a one-to-one relationship of vinyl community to things that ended up in my collection recently. But there's a bunch of people that I would love to thank in here. There's no particular order to this. I wanted to make a list so that, you know, of the ones that I did remember, I'd not forget while I'm sitting here. There's a lot of people who I watch all their videos, and I try and comment, but I'm not always great at, you know, getting out there and commenting on everybody's video that I watch. Sometimes I'm watching it, you know, somewhere where I don't really have something. Like a lot of times I'll watch on our TV, and there's not really a place to comment, so that's a little more difficult, so I don't always get there, and for that I apologize. But a lot of these people will comment on my videos, and I truly appreciate that. I really appreciate the engagement. So I'll just name a few. Sam, the Vinyl Douche. Love everything that the guy does. His personality is just amazing. The driest sense of humor. I just absolutely love that. His taste in music is phenomenal. The only thing that frustrates me about the Vinyl Douche is that he shows a lot of bands from the 90s, and the 90s are the worst era in music for vinyl because it's impossible to replace music from the 90s. You know, I think about my PJ Harvey records. I can't replace those. They're hundreds of dollars a piece because they're not getting repressed. And there weren't very many of them. And the same with so many bands from the 90s, that they're just ridiculously expensive because there were so few pressed when they were pressed on vinyl. So, Sam, you're killing me with the 90s references. Let's see. Oh, Dean. Grandma's Handbag. So, Grandma's Handbag, I absolutely adore his writing. He's just so insightful and so expressive and so capable of speaking eloquently about music, which is something that I've just never been able to do. I don't know if I've said this before on the VC, but it's an expression that I've heard throughout my life, and this can apply to so many different fields, and I knew it from art, but the expression was, writing about art is like dancing about architecture. And for me, that's the way I feel when I try and talk about music, that I just don't know how to use words to talk about, words to express music. It's just not something I'm capable of. And Dean is phenomenally capable of that, and I really respect that. I look forward to his top 100 videos every time he puts out a block of 20 or so, or I don't even remember how many. But they're just great. Don't hurry on those. Take your time. Next would be Vinyl Richie. Vinyl Richie is great for me because I grew up on punk rock, and he just has this incredible depth of knowledge and experience with music, and like me, he's kind of an omnivore when it comes to music. He's not precious about, you know, this category or this genre, but he has a real deep knowledge of punk, and I just really appreciate him talking about music that I know and love, and that I would hope to be able to replace someday, but punk records are really tough to find. So that's always great to watch Vinyl Richie. Norman Maslov, Mazzy. The thing that I love about Mazzy is that he's got, again, such a long history with music, and because of his background in photography and representing photographers, he has a great eye and a great sense of you know, how to present something, how to talk about things in an aesthetic way as well as a musical way, because he's also a musician. So that's great. I love Mazzy's stories. Let's see. Rob Walker. Rob Walker, Let the Music Play. I watch his videos all the time. If you would turn your camera sideways, it's just killing me, but I know it's your style, I know it's your thing, and I do appreciate it and I respect it. But I want to get closer to the records, and I can't do that with the skinny little panel. That's also the art director in me it's just driving me wild. But I love your videos, so don't stop what you're doing. Dots and Loops. Dots and Loops. I love Dots and Loops. Dots and Loops is awesome. I love his enthusiasm and approach. He is so incredibly respectful of genres and music in general that you don't ever get the sense that there's bad music in the world. There's just, you know, good music, and you got to be in the right frame of mind for a particular piece of music. Next is Headley, another fat bearded man talking about records. Headley loves country and western music. I grew up listening to country and western because my family did, and my extended family, and it was just, you know, really part of the air in the late 60s, early 70s, and throughout the 70s, really. And it was, you know, probably the first music that I pushed against, that I just felt like it wasn't my music, so I didn't really want to engage with it. And there's a lot about contemporary country music that's just a little disingenuous for me. But it's just another form of pop music. So I don't have a particular criticism for it there. It's just not music that I generally connect to. But Headley seems to find a way to bring me back into that, which is really great because there's a lot of music that he loves that I knew well, and it's nice to see someone from another country talking about a very American genre, and I get to see it from an outside perspective, a perspective that's just, it's connecting to the stories and the music itself, rather than the sort of social and political thing that it's wrapped up in here in this country, and that's great to hear and see. So thank you, Headley. And then, you know, there's a bunch of people that that I think need more attention in the VC. They have good channels that are maybe not as well known. People like David Newton, Miss LadySoul, CosmicVinyl, Ryan Smith, Picture 51 Blue. These are all people who have great channels and who do great things. And I watch their videos all the time and just, you know, really enjoy everything that I watch. They bring new things into my life. They bring new perspectives on music that I know and love already, or know and hate already. Though there's not much music that I truly hate. There's a lot of things that surprise me when people talk about music that I think, yeah, I can write that off. And then I hear somebody else's perspective on it and I think, maybe I shouldn't write that off. Maybe I should take another listen to it and see it from somebody else's perspective. And that's a really good thing. And then there's people like Steve Carlson who you know, been around a while, have a good following, but take the time to comment on the videos that I put out there, and like all of the people that I'm mentioning, that take the time to comment on my videos, I'm so appreciative of that, and thank you, everybody, and that's really all I have to say this time. But I just felt like this was something that was something I wanted to put out there. Thanks, everybody.